Well, it's time now for our press review, and that shocking attack on preschool children in Annecy is dominating not just the French media today, but also the foreign press. Djoko Laurent is here to take us through it.
Well, Sharon, there's really one word dominating the French papers today, as you'll see here in this sort of selection of regional papers in France. You see it here, the word l'effroi, which means horror. So horror really is a word that is dominating the papers. That attack has, as you said, left several preschoolers and 2 adults fighting for their lives. Le Parisien also headlining on this word l'effroi, talking about this Syrian asylum seeker who was granted asylum in Sweden, father himself, and in his early 30s he stabbed these children in a seemingly random park attack in Annecy. Now, among the children was a British citizen as well, which is why a lot of the British papers are also headlining on this. You see it here, stabbed in their pushchairs, British girl knifed in park horror, the hero who sought to save the innocents. It is also the focus of a lot of the British papers, indeed. The Daily Metro, they're talking about the hero who fought to save the innocents, focusing on really hailing a heroine who leapt into the path of the knife-wielding attacker to protect the children. La Croix, the French paper, also talking about another hero, a young 24-year-old Catholic man on a tour of France's cathedrals who happened to be there at that time and used his backpack to try and neutralize the attacker and prevent him from going back to the park.
There's also, Deepti, already a lot of political jostling around the issue of immigration here in France following that attack.
Yeah, I mean, the profile of the attack, you know, foreign and asylum seeker, his victims and the age of his victims really make this a ripe breeding ground for right-wing French MPs. Le Monde today, the French paper says, unlike 11 years ago, rather, during the Islamist attacks in Toulouse and Montauban, where a 48-hour truce was sort of observed by French politicians, this time round, the chance for politicizing this attack was too good to pass up, coming at a time also when the French government is mulling the terms of an immigration bill and where the right is claiming tougher asylum conditions, which is really the reason why this attack was so quickly politicized. Now, a reporter for the Swiss paper Le Temps says in this article, rather sarcastically, that French national unity barely lasted 1 hour after the attack before politicians began their political opportunism. And you have a similar condemnation from La Croix in its editorial today, where the editor really is shocked that the man's background and the horror of this attack, quote, lends itself to political demagoguery and opportunism around refugees in France.
Moving on from that tragedy then, Deepti, a university in the Netherlands has published conclusions from what is the largest study into animal mobility during the pandemic.
Yeah, it's a really interesting article, one that a study that the Washington Post has picked up on. So researchers had been attaching GPS trackers to various elephants, giraffes, bears, deer, lion, and other animals in the years leading up to the pandemic for research purposes. So when the lockdowns occurred, it was sort of a lucky coincidence, if you like. It was prime time to track what 40 animal species basically got up to while we were locked down. And what they found was that obviously human activity inevitably impacts animal behavior, but actually that sometimes it can be a good thing. So what they found, for instance, was mountain goats moseyed their way into Welsh towns, but there was also more and more brown bears and pumas who became more brazen in their search for food in these sort of ghost town villages and cities. In some cases, though, the lack of humans actually made certain species vulnerable. So on a Swedish island, there was a 7-fold increase in white-tailed eagles, which is a good thing for that species, but not good for the seabird that the eagles prey on, and who were inadvertently being protected thanks to human activity on the island. Some fascinating findings, well worth a read in the Washington Post today.
And next up, it'll be well worth a watch later. You're leaving us with a preview of what will be a sumptuous semi-final showdown at the French Open. Later, reigning champion Novak Djokovich facing off against world #1 Carlos Alcaraz.
Yes, that's right. And L'Equipe says, the French sports paper, that it is the clash of the generations pitting experience. Novak Djokovich is eyeing his 23rd Grand Slam title against youth. Carlos Alcaraz, the Spaniard, is 16 years younger than Novak Djokovich. He's looking for his second title. Fun fact, when Djokovic won his first Grand Slam title in 2008, Alcaraz was just 5 years old. Indeed, the Spanish sports paper Marca is going with a picture of a very young Alcaraz on its front page. This is him competing in the under-13s at the French Open back in 2015. The paper says, once upon a time, a young Alcaraz dreamed of this moment. Well, it is now a reality. He's just one step away from his first ever French Open final. Sharon.
Dreams do come true, Deep T. Thank you so much for that. We'll see how that game pans out a little bit later on. That's all the action at the French Open. Deep T, we'll be back a little bit later with another press review.